more about all the problems that are now arising in the States, and here we clearly know very little about. Okay, so I will appreciate if you can tell us, to our audience, about all the problems that have been now being discussed in the States. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for having me, and thank you for everybody for listening. So I will tell you about myself. I'm an emergency room doctor, so I work in the emergency room, and I was very active during the COVID era. I owned an urgent care center, which was like a small emergency clinic, and I saw what was coming to the rest of the world. I could see it from China. So I started to prepare my staff, and I started to prepare the facility by buying supplies and things like that. And because of that, we became the sort of main testing site for our area. And eventually we became the main treatment site for the entire state of Maryland. So the United States has 50 states. Maryland is one of them. And I built up multiple centers to infuse monoclonal antibodies, which was the treatment for COVID. And we became the largest in the state of Maryland. Bigger than Johns Hopkins. Your audiences may have heard of Johns Hopkins. I trained there. That's where I did my residency, that hospital. But my facilities were providing more antibodies than Johns Hopkins was, or than the University of Maryland, which is also a large academic center in Maryland. And the federal government of the United States actually approached me and asked me to help set up a site for infusing monoclonal antibodies in Maryland, and I did. I formed a partnership with my company, the United States government, and the government of Maryland, and we set up a site and we ran it together. And then the administration at the time, President Biden was the president, so it was the Biden administration. They started to politicize the monoclonal antibodies, and they started to they took over control of how they were being distributed. So before that, you could get the medication directly from the manufacturers and there was no problem. When the government took over, they started to use what they called equity as a means to determine who was going to get the medicine and who wasn't. And all of a sudden that created artificial shortages for this medication overnight. And I started to speak out about it on national news in the United States and international news throughout the world. I was on TV at least weekly, if not twice or three times a week, talking about this. And then the administration shut the whole program down based on bad data, and they just stopped providing monoclonal antibodies. They said you couldn't use them anymore. And these medicines were really the cure for COVID. They really would cure people from COVID. And it was unconscionable what they were doing because people were dying because of that. So I started to speak out. I was on Fox News and I was on Newsmax, two very large news organizations in the United States. And I started to basically say that the administration is going to kill people because of this and people are going to die. And 4 months later, with no warning, I find myself brought up on criminal charges for fraud, for healthcare fraud. And, there was no real investigation that the government did. They got my name wrong on all the documents that they submitted to the court. They didn't even look at the patient charts that they were accusing me of fraudulently billing, basically. Essentially, they were saying we were upcoding, we were charging too much money. In the United States, the way that works is, first of all, so your audience understands, healthcare fraud in the US typically involves things that bill for patients that don't actually exist, for people that you make up. And that's not what's alleged here. These people that they charged me with 5 counts of healthcare fraud, all of these people are real. They're real human beings. In fact, the government, the prosecutors called them, 3 of them at my trial, and they testified. They were real human beings. And they said, yes, I got seen, I got tested. Where's the fraud? I mean, there's no fraud here. And I didn't even see any of these patients. I had nurse practitioners and PAs who work underneath me see the patients. And the whole thing is crazy. And the chief federal judge adjudicating my trial, who happened to be the chief judge the chief federal judge in the entire state of Maryland, at the beginning of my trial, before the trial actually, even said to the government, to the prosecutors, this case looks like a case of, quote, shoot first and ask questions later, end quote, because they really hadn't done any investigation. Even the judge pointed that out. Anyway, when we went to trial, because I didn't do anything wrong, and the judge issued this 93-page opinion, 93 pages, you can see how thick it is, acquitting me of all charges and saying that, the government didn't prove its case. There was no evidence that I did anything wrong. And he let me essentially said, you're acquitted, you're innocent. And also, in case the government appeals, we're going to grant you a new trial. So as the Biden administration was packing up their bags because Trump was about to be inaugurated, they decided to appeal it. Right before the inauguration, they decided to appeal it. So literally weeks before the inauguration of President Trump, the Biden administration appealed this decision. So now I'm facing a second criminal trial for the same thing in August of this year. And the judge said some pretty striking things. I just want to read a couple of them. He said, the government did not carry its burden and no reasonable jury could have so concluded. He said, the evidence weighs so heavily in favor of the defendant that it would be unjust to enter judgment against him. So, he said, I mean, there's more quotes than that, but those are pretty strong ones. Just to put this into context, through the time of the indictment, it's about a year, we saw over 100,000 patients. The government picked 5, and they're these 5 right here. These are the patients. These are their charts. I took out their names so you can't see, but these are the patient charts. The government chose 5 patients out of 100,000, and they never even had a coder look at the charts. In the United States, the way we bill for medical care is you see a patient, you submit their name, and you submit a bunch of codes. And those codes, there are over 69,000 codes that we use to identify medical problems and things in medicine. And the government says that we picked the wrong code. During a global pandemic, when people were dying and we saw over 100,000 patients, they picked 5 and said we chose the wrong code out of 69,000, which in and of itself is insane. But even if you think about, well, okay, we were billing a certain code that the government never called me and asked me to say, hey, could you explain why you did this? I had reasonable reasons for doing it. And I didn't do the coding, by the way. The nurse practitioners and PAs who saw the patients did. I recommended to them that this would be the way to code, but I didn't do the coding myself. But even if you say that the coding level was a little bit too high, that we were billing a level 4 and it should have been a level 3, for example, the difference between those two, the next lowest level that we could have billed, is about $50, 50 US dollars per patient. So if you multiply that times 5, that's $250. So essentially, the United States government wants to put me in jail for 50 years, 50 years, and charge me millions and millions of dollars over $250 billing dispute. And I would say to any reasonable person listening or reading this, if you go to the grocery store or you go somewhere and you think you get overcharged, what do? You ask to speak to the manager or you speak to the person at the checkout and you say, can we discuss this? I think I got overcharged. You don't call the police. You don't make a federal case out of it. You ask the person, you say, I think there's a problem here. But they never did that, and they never gave me any opportunity to explain myself. And what's really striking about my case is the American Medical Association writes the rules that the government accused me of breaking. And they wrote a brief to the court on my behalf, which they never do, by the way, but they did. And they said that I didn't break the rules that they wrote that the government is accusing me of breaking. So the very people who wrote the rules came to my defense, and yet the government is still coming after me. It boggles the mind, and it's just insane. I know a lot of these words probably don't translate into Spanish very well, but it's very unfair. And in the United States, we pride ourselves on liberty and justice and the quote unquote American way. And what is happening to me is the most un-American thing imaginable. And it's horrible and it's disgusting. And unfortunately, it's not just in the United States. We see it elsewhere, where the government reaches out and tries to silence the people they don't like. I exercised my First Amendment right. In the United States, we have a constitution and we have amendments to that constitution. And the First Amendment guarantees you your freedom of speech. I exercised that. I spoke out against the government because what they were doing was wrong and it was killing people. And they came after me for it. And even more so, the fact that the monoclonal antibodies, which is what I was a big proponent of, and I was talking about, was the cure for COVID. The fact that they worked so well, put the emergency use authorization, which in this country, in order to during COVID, in order to give the vaccine, it had to have an emergency use authorization. It was never approved by the FDA, the Drug Administration. It had an emergency use authorization. The fact that there was something else that would work against COVID put the emergency use authorization of the vaccine in direct risk, because there's a federal law in the United States that if there's something else that works, the emergency use authorization goes away. So if the monoclonal antibodies had really been proven to work like they did, the vaccine would have lost its license to work, basically, to be given in the U.S. So I put that, the fact that I was out there talking about it, put it in direct risk of being taken away, and they just couldn't have that. So they had to come after me and they had to silence me, and it's awful and it's terrible, but that's exactly what happened.
But I really thought that being Trump under another kind of ideas about health, why things are not changing with the new administration, with Kennedy, that really, I know he's on the other side of the Biden administration.
You mean in my case in particular, or are you talking about in general?
In your case, but I think there are other doctors that in the same case as you.
Yes, absolutely. And I know you're going to talk to one of them. He's a friend of mine, Dr. Kumar. So I firmly believe that the Trump administration will do the right thing, and they will look at this case and they will not let me rot in jail for 50 years for something that I didn't do, and for something that is completely insane, and something that has already been adjudicated by the chief judge of the state of Maryland, who, by the way, is not a Republican judge. He was appointed by President Obama. So the guy who acquitted me, and I just want to point out that in the United States, when a federal judge does something like this, it is incredibly, incredibly rare. Okay, this doesn't happen very often, that a federal judge, first of all, acquits somebody and then also writes a 93-page opinion. Like, the Supreme Court of the United States does not write 93-page opinions. And this opinion was very, very powerful and very, very well thought out and well written. But I firmly believe that I just have to find that right person in the Trump administration. See, the Biden people knew that if they could start the process, for me at least, before Trump was inaugurated, the snowball, if you want to use that analogy, starts rolling down the hill and just keeps gathering steam and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just have to find the right person to help stop that. And I will tell you that I've spoken to a number of people in the Trump administration who are trying to make that happen. But it's just finding that one person that can just take a look at this objectively and say, this is a silly case. It doesn't make any sense. It's clear weaponization or lawfare. You understand what that term means, right?
Yes, but the problem I can see here. Yes, excuse me, go on.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, so I think I just got to find that right person. And I think I'm on the process to do that, but you know, it's hard, and government's a huge bureaucracy. It's hard to stop something once it has momentum and inertia, but that's why I'm speaking out, because I'm talking about it to try to find that person. And I think the Trump administration is entirely on my side and they want to help, but I just got to find that right person.
Yes, well, because the problem here is not only your problem, it's a problem of everyone, because I am looking for a good doctor and I cannot find anyone, because all the doctors are scared to do their work.
You bring up an amazing point. 100%. So you're absolutely right. So it's not just about me. And I'm sorry if I made it sound like that. It's obviously, this is important to me because they're talking about taking away my freedom and everything I've worked for. And I have 4 children and I have a wife, and I don't want to sit in jail for something I didn't do. But you're absolutely right. What they're doing, and I mentioned the First Amendment, and we take that very, very seriously in this country. Like, we think the right to be able to say what you want to say is not to speak in agreement with the government, but to have the opportunity to speak against the government. That's why that's there. It's not to say, you know, oh yeah, the government's great. It's to have the ability to say whatever you want in opposition to the powers that be, the people in power. It's very important. And Europe, I know, also is having a similar problem where people are being silenced. The problem now is that you have a bunch of physicians, doctors, who are afraid, as you said, to speak out. And the next pandemic, and I can guarantee you there will be another one, whether it's done by man or whether it's done by accident. We're a globalized society. There will be another pandemic. There's no question about it. It's just a matter of when. But what they're doing to people like me and others is silencing us so that there's the next pandemic. Nobody is going to say a word because they're going to come after you and destroy your life. And the people know that. So number one, they're going to not speak out and they're not going to question authority. And number two, they're not going to step up and do the right thing, because why would you? Why would you put yourself in a position like me where they can come after you and try to destroy you because you did the right thing? And I say that. So I was out working 24 hours a day for 2.5 years. I didn't see my family. I didn't see my wife. I lived off my stupid cell phone for 2 years, working night and day, trying to save as many people as I could and do as much as I could. And I built 3 monoclonal antibody sites. I would have built 100 if I could have. I couldn't find the people to work. I couldn't find the facilities. I couldn't do it. But if I could have, I would have. And I got recognized by our state governor. Our state governor came to me personally and gave me a citation and said, "This is for you for all the bravery and work that you did during COVID." He came personally, showed up at my facility and handed it to me. The state legislature, so the government of my state, did the same thing. They voted and they issued me a proclamation and said, for all the work that you did. The State Medical Society named me its Person of the Year and gave me an award for that because of all the work I did during COVID. And the federal government comes after me years later and indicts me and tries to throw me in jail. My point in saying that is that I was out there doing everything I could to save as many people as I could. Why on earth, the next time this happens, would anybody put themselves in that position? Why would anybody step up to do the right thing and to be that voice of reason when you know that they're going to come after you and try to throw you in jail? And you're absolutely right. It's a great question. And it's very scary because people rely on medical care. And if you're talking about a pandemic, you need to be able to go see a doctor. But when they come out with silly mandates like the 6-foot rule that made no sense. I don't know if you guys had it in Europe, but we had it in the United States. It was everyone had to stay 6 feet apart. And it turns out that was made out of nonsense. There was no science behind it. It was just some guy in a room said, "We're going to make 6 feet the number, the magic number." I mean, it was ridiculous. And if you talked about it and you said this is silly, everybody came down on you and they tried to silence you about it. And you want to talk about ivermectin, or you want to talk about hydroxychloroquine, other options that could be helpful. You were completely pushed aside and labeled a crazy person. And even worse, they would take away your medical license. They would throw you in jail. I mean, it's insane. And that is no way to have a free society. And it's very scary.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the problem here is that all is about money, So at the end, health is about money. And all is a big business. This is not absolutely a good thing. So the thing is, we have to work together, all of us that have the same point of view, including the States and in Europe. So my concern is to reach as much people as possible to join us.
Absolutely. And yo hablo un poco español, so no muy bueno. But you're absolutely right. And we all speak the same language. Whatever language you speak, we all speak the same language, right? We all want to get what's best for everybody else. We want a healthy population and healthy, not just medically, but healthy physically and healthy mentally and spiritually, and have the freedom to speak out.
Yeah.
I know that Europe is another part of the world that values free speech, but that is under attack.
Yeah.
And it's under attack on so many levels. And where goes Europe goes the United States, and vice versa, right? I mean, we feed off each other. And it's just horrific what's going on in the world when you see that everybody who wants to say something about anything is being silenced and shut down and put in jail for their thoughts and for their what they're writing and what they're saying. I mean, it's crazy. If you told me 20 years ago that this was going to happen, I would have thought you were insane.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? But you wonder how did World War II happen, right? How did the Nazis get away with doing what they did? It's the same tactics. They used the same tactics. Now they didn't commit genocide. I'm not going that far, but they took the same tactics that the Nazis used to gain power, and then to expand their power, and they did it with a virus. That would be great. I would love to.
Yeah.
I can tell you that again, speaking as an American, okay, because I can't speak as a European because I'm not a European, but I have been to Europe. I love Europe. I love Spain. It's one of my favorite countries in the world. This is a problem, and it's not going away. It's getting worse, and it's a problem because and look, I mean, what they're trying to do to me is awful and terrible, but they're not just doing it to me, right? They're doing it to me in a very magnificent, a very large way, but and a very impactful way. But they do it to a smaller extent to everybody else. If you have a dissenting view to anything that the governments are saying, that this globalized governments of the world, they will try to silence you, and that is no way to live and to be a free society. If you question anything, they come after you. And again, to your point, like, you can't find a doctor because they're scared. There's a reason that they're scared. People don't want to speak out because they're afraid that what's happening to me is going to happen to them. And they have perfectly reasonable reasons to be scared. Like it's very scary, and it's no way to have a free society, and it's terrible. And we have to fight back. We have to fight back as a group. And you question these silly things that happened during COVID. Again, at least in the U.S., I can't speak to Europe, but and all of a sudden, you know who Joe Rogan is, the podcaster?
Excuse me?
Do you know Joe Rogan, the podcaster? Does that name ring a bell?
No.
Oh, all right. Well, he's the largest podcaster in the United States. His name is Joe Rogan. He's got millions and millions and millions of viewers, and he said he took ivermectin during the pandemic, and he said it cured me. It was great. I felt much better. And everybody started to talk about how stupid Joe Rogan was, and how he was taking pills that you use for horses and for animals, and I mean, it's ridiculous. Here was a man who was speaking against the orthodoxy, and they tried to destroy him for doing it. And it's just, that's what they do, and it's terrible. And you speak about anything that they don't like, and they try to destroy you. And it's you can point to a million different examples.
It's for me because Kennedy, I was working with a doctor when the Good Doctors for the Truth, for the Truth. I was with them, with the doctor. I used to work for a doctor from the States, an Argentinian, Dr. Gaston Cornulava, and he talked to me about Kennedy. In this time, Kennedy was not absolutely with the administration as now. So for me, it's a surprise that they are not working to manage all this mess.
Well, okay, that's a good question and a good point. So I think I don't know the man. I don't know Secretary Kennedy, but I know of him, obviously, and I've read about a lot of him, and I know people who know him. And I will tell you that I firmly believe that he's trying his best. And the government is certainly the government of the United States. I'm sure the rest of the world is the same. It's a huge morass and a huge mess. And it's a big, just picture a giant puddle of mud. They call it the swamp here in the United States, the swamp, like a wet, just thick, muddy mess. And he's trying to fight through that swamp. And it's really hard to do. And I think he's trying to do the best he can. He has done some really important things, like he took away the emergency use authorization for the vaccine, for the COVID-19 vaccine, and he is now defunding research for mRNA vaccinations. Not because he, quote, a lot of people will say, oh, look, he's a vaccine hater, and that is not true. He just asks, show me the proof, show me the data. And frankly, that's how we should all be. That's what science demands. Science demands to be open-minded, to question everything, and to say, you know what, show me the data. And if the data supports something, I'm gonna go with it. If the data doesn't support it, I'm gonna go against it. That's it. That's what science demands. It doesn't demand an orthodoxy. It doesn't demand blind allegiance to something. It demands that you be open-minded, you question everything, and that you follow the actual data. And that, I believe, is what Secretary Kennedy's trying to do. But all these haters, all these people are coming out and say, oh, he's anti-vaccine, and he's not anti-vaccine. He's anti-vaccines that don't work or that don't have data for them. That's all. And that's a perfectly reasonable stance. In fact, that's the right stance. But but people are attacking him for it. And so I think he's really trying to do the best job that he can, but it is really, really hard.
Yeah, yes. Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you very much to share all this.
So
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you, Mariel.
Thank
Nice to meet you.
Bye.